Hi guys, so I know it's been a while, but here we go. Episode 7, percentages. So what are we going to be learning in this episode? You will learn how to write a percent as a fraction and how to write a fraction as a percent. So what is a percent? The word percent means per hundred. So a percent is a ratio or a fraction whose denominator is 100. So some examples of percents are 15%, 22.7%, so you can have a percent that has a decimal with it. 108%, which is greater than 100%, which means that this percent is greater than 1. And 0.8%. So we can also have percentages that are less than 1. So a couple of common percents that are worth memorizing. Here is a table, and then I also added some below, but some important percents are 10%, 20, 25, 30%, and I added 1/3, which is 33.3 repeating percent. So that would be the way that you would write 1/3. So since 1/3 is 0.333 repeating forever, to write it as a percent, we do 33.3 repeating percent. 40%, 50%, 60%, and then 2/3 would fit in next. So 2/3 would be 66.6 repeating percent. 70%, 75, 80, 90, and 100%. And then I included also 1/9. So anything that has a denominator of 9, remember the numerator is going to repeat forever. So 1/9 is equal to 0.1 repeating, which will equal 11.1 repeating percent. So again, these are worth memorizing. So can we write all percents as fractions? Since a percent is a ratio or fraction with a denominator of 100, yes, every single percent can be written as a fraction. So it's easy to write a percent as a fraction when the percent is a whole number. When the percent is a whole number, the percent is the numerator and the denominator is 100. Some examples are 22%. 22 is a whole number, so that means that the numerator is going to be 22. Since it's a percent, it's out of 100, so 22% equals 22 hundredths, which can also be simplified to 11 over 50. Another example is 115%. This is a whole number, however, it is greater than 100%. We can still write it as a fraction though. The numerator is 115, the denominator is still 100. So that would be improper, or we can write it as a mixed number of 1 and 15 hundredths, and then we could simplify it by 5 to make it 1 and 3 twentieths. So what if a percent is not a whole number? Can we still write that as a fraction? An example is 22.8%. So this means that this percent is going to be between 22 and 23%, and it's going to be closer to 23%. So since percents are out of 100, we can write this percent as 22.8 over 100. But since we don't write fractions with decimals, we want to get rid of the decimal. So what we can do is we can scale up by 10 to have a new denominator of 1,000. So 22.8 hundredths is equal to 228 thousandths. We could then simplify from there by scaling down by 2 or something else, but if it doesn't say to simplify, we don't have to. So 22.8% is equal to 228 thousandths. So another example is 0.3%. So we want to write this as a fraction. So side note, this percent is less than 1, so it's going to be a really, really small percent. So since percents are out of 100, we can write this percent as 0.3 out of 100. Now again, we don't want to write a fraction with a decimal in it, so we can scale this up to get rid of our decimal. So if we multiply the numerator and the denominator by 10, 0.3 hundredths is equal to 3 thousandths. So 0.3% is equal to 3 thousandths. Now, can we write all fractions as percents? Writing a fraction as a percent is very simple when the denominator is 100. When the denominator is 100, the numerator is the percent. So for example, 4 hundredths, since the denominator is 100, we take our numerator of 4, and that's going to be our percent. So 4 hundredths is 4%. Similarly, we have 56 hundredths. Since our denominator is 100, our numerator is just going to be our percent. So 56 hundredths equals 56%. But what if a fraction does not have a denominator of 100? Does that mean we can't write it as a percent? So when fractions don't have a denominator of 100, we can still write it as a percent. All we need to do is scale the fraction up or down to find an equivalent fraction with the denominator of 100. So if we have this example here, we have 12 twentieths. Our denominator is not 100, so we can't just say that this is going to be 12%. So we can either scale it up, or we could think about how we could simplify to get a friendly fraction that we then know what percent it is. So first I'm going to talk about when you scale up. So we can set up a proportion to scale up. So 12 twentieths equals x over 100. Now to get from 20 to 100, we multiply by 5. So I do the same at my numerator. So 12 times 5 equals 60. So 12 twentieths equals 60 hundredths. Since my denominator is now 100, my numerator is going to be my percent. So 60 hundredths equals 60%. Another strategy for this example would be to simplify, then scale up. Since 12 and 20 have a common factor of 2, they also have a common factor of 4, but if we use 2, we can simplify 12 twentieths to 6 tenths, which then we could scale up to have a denominator of 100. 6 tenths equals 60 hundredths, which is 60%. Last example. Well, what about 7/16? What if I want to write this as a percent? We can set up a proportion, similar to our last problem, to find an equivalent fraction with the denominator of 100. Well, the only problem with this is that 16 will not go into 100 evenly. So we can't scale up to 100. Also, we can't simplify 7/16. They don't have anything in common. So what do? We can write 7/16 as a decimal and then change it from a decimal to a percent. So if I divide 7 by 16, I get 0.4375. So since I now have my fraction as a decimal, I can now write it as a percent. So if I think about 0.4375, I can write that as a fraction with a denominator of 10,000. This is helpful because then I can simplify to get a denominator of 100, which will then help me write my percent. So if I have 4,375 10,000ths, and I want to simplify this to have a denominator of 10, I'm going to divide by 100. So if I divide my numerator and denominator by 100, I now have 43.75 over 100. Since my denominator is 100, my numerator is my percent. So that means that 7/16 is equal to 43.75%. Okay, that is it. See y'all tomorrow.